And the last time I felt that kind of tremor in this building was on 9/11, when American Airlines Flight 77 slammed into the building. And that was the first reaction of some of the people in the building. Oh, my God, it's happened again. But when it continued for 5 to 10 seconds, people realized that it had to be an earthquake. Now, my family, my home, is in northern Montgomery County, which was near the epicenter of an earthquake about a year ago, last July, and they said there that my son and my wife said that the tremor continued there for about a minute and got so strong they couldn't stand, and they positioned themselves in a doorway, as you're taught to do. My son, having once lived in Los Angeles, he had his wits about him and said, "This is an earthquake, let's protect ourselves." Fortunately, however, no damage in our neighborhood, no damage here.
Right.
They'd given the all clear after they evacuated the Pentagon temporarily. They declared the building safe, and now everybody's streaming back in.
All right, Mick, thank you very much. I want to remind our audience what you're looking at. You see the Capitol there and also the iconic view from Times Square. A lot of activity. We've got some information on nuclear plants in the area. The North Anna plant, that is the one closest to the epicenter in Virginia. It's on Lake Anna, Virginia, and that plant has 2 reactors, according to the information I have. Both reactors tripped automatically and shut down. The plant has declared a, quote, unusual event, which, by the way, is the lowest stage in their emergency scale. Let me go now to Tom Costello, my colleague standing by. Tom, I understand you have some new updates for me as well.
Well, the information you have is what I just now put into our hot file, Tamara. That's exactly right. I just got off the phone with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They're telling me that that plant in North Anna, Virginia, which is right on the near the epicenter, it sits on Lake Anna, Virginia. It's the North Anna plant. 2 reactors there. Both have tripped, as you said. This is also described there as an unusual event. Their words, which is the lowest stage of their emergency scale. They now say they're going to do a walk-down inspection and assess the conditions to maintain safety there. It's not clear if there are any other concerns there. However, 5 other plants have declared unusual events. These are 5 other nuclear plants along the East Coast. Hope Creek, New Jersey, Salem, New Jersey, Oyster Creek, New Jersey, Susquehanna, as well as 3 Mile Island, and in Maryland, Calvert Cliffs. Now, we want to make it very clear. We are not saying that there's any emergency there. We are not saying that there's any reason to be concerned that there's an emergency, but rather they have declared, or they have notified the NRC of, quote, unusual events. So now they go through a number of steps to ensure that those plants are safe. However, for the plant at North Anna plant at near the epicenter, Lake Anna, Virginia, that plant has 2 reactors, came online in 1978. Both reactors have tripped, shut down automatically. The plant has declared an unusual event, and now they are beginning their procedures to assess any concerns whatsoever. While I have you, let me also tell you that several airport control towers have been evacuated or were evacuated. They include JFK in New York, as well as Newark Airport on the Jersey side there of New York, as they continue to inspect not only the towers for any potential concerns, but also the airstrips themselves, make sure that there's no cracks or serious cracks in the foundation of the airstrips right now.
Right.
That's what I can give you at this very moment.
Okay, and that is a lot, Tom. And our colleague John Harwood at CNBC says that he was on the Acela, that's the Amtrak fast train, if you will, that it stopped outside of Baltimore while Amtrak checks the soundness of its tracks. So that's the information I'm just receiving from John Harwood. Also, according to the U.S. Geological Survey's website, the earthquake today in Virginia is the largest quake to hit Virginia since a 5.9 quake struck in Giles County, Virginia, and that was May 5th, 1897. So this is the information I'm receiving. Let me go back to our headquarters in New York. And Craig, I'm getting a lot of various details about evacuations and such. The last one was at Union Station in D.C. Do we have any more updates? Tom was telling us about the airport as well. Any more news regarding evacuations that you've been able to get in?
No, we don't have any new additional information on evacuations. But what we are hearing, and you mentioned social media and Twitter earlier, we're hearing from a lot of folks who are having a hard time using their cell phones. They're having a hard time getting in touch to check on their loved ones, so they are sending text messages. They're on Twitter and Facebook as well. So we're hearing from a lot of those people. But in terms of evacuations, there's no new information other than what we've reported already. You mentioned Union Station down in Washington, D.C. a short time ago. Union Station at last check still evacuated. Also in Cleveland, shock waves from the earthquake there forced the Major League Baseball game there between the Mariners and the Indians. We're told that there were some concerns there, so folks there in the stadium were on standby for a while. There was not an official evacuation, but they were concerned that they were going to have to evacuate that stadium. But again, at this point, no new information on evacuations, Tamara.
Right. All right, Craig, thank you. Now let me go to Lester Holt. I understand Lester is in Midtown Manhattan, in the center of the city. Lester, what are you seeing there?
Well, actually, I just came back from downtown Manhattan. I was actually at Ground Zero shooting a story at the new memorial. So it's a construction site and didn't feel it. Came outside and noticed people standing around buildings. And then as we've been making our way back to Midtown here in the vehicle, outside a lot of high-rise buildings downtown, office workers who had been evacuated either by force or are on their own, standing outside. We passed what appeared to be a daycare center of some sort where there were, they had actually taken cribs out on the street with the children. The workers were caring for the children. Certainly no signs of damage, and you wouldn't even expect it in an earthquake of this magnitude. But you know, people here are not going to react like they will in Tokyo or California. This is a rare event in New York City. I'm now in the Village, going through Greenwich Village, and it seems like a normal day here. People going about their business, but clearly around the tall office buildings, people were taking precautions, standing out there waiting for some kind of instructions. Even those who felt it weren't sure that it was really an earthquake, because it's not the first thing that goes through your mind in this part of the country. But as I said, as I go through now into Chelsea and Greenwich Village, life seems to be normal, people walking back and forth. But around those high-rise buildings, folks are being very, very cautious. Cameron?
It is so interesting, Lester, because you have, of course, great perspective on how folks out west react to this as opposed to what we're seeing. And I can't tell you how many people really are on Twitter wanting the world to know, for lack of a better description, that they felt it in Ohio, that they felt it in their small community in Pennsylvania. It's like pinging across the East Coast how many people are reacting to what would be seen as a small tremor out west in California.
Yeah, I'm a California native. I grew up there and lived in Alaska for a time, so and I was in Japan and Haiti for all the aftershocks there, so you get a different perspective. But clearly, no one knows what to expect here. It doesn't happen very often. This is a city with a lot of old buildings, and certainly people are probably doing the prudent and cautious thing, letting the building engineers take a look and make sure no damage. But we can tell you now, I've driven all the way from the financial district into Chelsea and about to head into Midtown. No signs of any damage. Just people, and not even a panic. Just people kind of standing about and shaking their heads like, wow, did you feel that?
Yeah, and that's what you're hearing a lot online. Thank you very much, Lester. Let me go back to Andrea Mitchell's at our D.C. Bureau. And Andrea, WRC is reporting that air traffic control tower at Andrews Air Force Base has been evacuated, which is affecting their flight plan. They apparently have their flight plan come out of that particular control tower. And we heard a similar thing from Tom Costello, the air traffic control affected at JFK and at least 2 other airports in our area.
Well, Andrews, as you know, is a major air facility here, and it's all of the governmental aircraft travel in and out of Andrews. That's probably about 10 to 15 miles outside of Washington, D.C. in Prince George's County, so that is a major factor, and we have to check with the other airports as well in the area. You heard also Tom Costello, of course, talking about the nuclear plant in Virginia having been triggered with an automatic shutdown. That is a very good thing indeed. The reason why there was so much trouble in Japan, of course, is the tsunami, and we're not in any kind of zone like that. It's the water that affected the power, the electricity that has to keep the coolant going around the reactor rods. So as long as they have electricity, they are fine there, because that water has to keep going to keep the reactor rods cool once the reactor itself is shut down. We are now being permitted to go back inside into our studios. This is a 3-story building. As you know, we were on the air. I guess we were in a commercial break because we were just suddenly faced with that rumbling of what we now know, at least initially, has been reported reported as a 5.9 magnitude earthquake, and so rare for this area, for this whole East Coast area, indeed. As I said, my only other experience with an earthquake, not being a Californian, was once in Belgrade, and it was a similar kind of experience, but not anything quite so dramatic as feeling the whole room around you just start shaking as it did before we had to evacuate. And you heard the report from John Harwood about Amtrak having been stopped while they checked the tracks. The only other thing, Tamron, is that there is a report from our station here, WRC, and they have pictures apparently of some sandstone and some granite crumbling from the spires of the cathedral, the Washington Cathedral, which is only about 1.5 miles from here.
Wow. Okay, Andrea, thank you very much. Let me go to Pete Williams. I understand Andrea mentioned Amtrak. We got that tweet in, or that note from John Harwood, our colleague, saying that Amtrak was checking the tracks outside of Baltimore. Pete, what's the update there on Amtrak?
Well, it's not just the tracks that they're inspecting, and this is kind of interesting. It should have been, I guess, obvious to us at first, but Amtrak has basically, according to an Amtrak official I just talked to, shut down service in several northeastern states while it looks at what they generally call infrastructure. Now, you're looking at a still picture of people outside Union Station in Washington, D.C. just a moment ago. That's the picture of people that's just down the street from the U.S. Capitol building, and you see people outside Union Station. So infrastructure would obviously include train stations themselves and tracks, but also Amtrak says tunnels and bridges, and that makes a lot of sense if you think about, and so if you think about how much of that there is to look at, just coming into New York City, for example, or into Washington, D.C., or into Baltimore, or a lot of these cities up and down the northeast corridor of Amtrak, there are lots of tunnels and bridges that trains go under and through, so all that's going to have to be looked at. So we're looking at many, many hours, I would think, of a shutdown of service of Amtrak. Obviously, this will vary by lines. There may be some that they can quickly check and determine that there's not a problem. What an Amtrak official says is, this is basically what Amtrak goes through on the West Coast when there's an earthquake, and they're doing the same thing here. So a lot of this is new to us on the East Coast. I'm sure a lot of our viewers on the West Coast are saying, you know, welcome to the party. But so that is a considerable, that's considerably going to affect, obviously, the afternoon commute and potentially even tomorrow morning for Amtrak and the Northeast Corridor. Now, secondly, a Homeland Security official tells me that a quick pulse around Washington, D.C. finds no reports of any damage or any injuries from the earthquake here in the Washington area, Tamron.
All right, thank you, Pete. Now let's go to Bill Cahill. He's with the Port Authority in New York. Bill, let me start off with getting the information where things stand right now.
The Federal Aviation Administration evacuated its control towers at John F. Kennedy International and Newark International Airports after the tremblers hit. They're going to do an inspection to make sure that the building is sound, and we're going to inspect our airfields at those two airports and make sure they're sound. And if they are, we will resume operations. Our other airports, Teterboro Airport, LaGuardia Airport, and Stewart International Airport, were not affected.
Bill, were you in the office when these tremors were felt, and did you feel anything? We're actually, hang on, Bill, we're looking at some video that's just feeding in of people, I believe, in the press room when the tremors were felt. You see them scattering about. Bill, tell me what was happening in your office when those tremors were felt.
Some people in my office felt the tremors, and I assume, like everyone else affected, immediately said, "What was that?" Funny enough, I didn't feel a thing. And I have felt earthquakes in the Northeast before. I think about a 4 magnitude, and those I felt. They felt like a train rumbling nearby, but I didn't feel this one.
Can you tell me what else might be impacted as far as transportation and travel from your vantage point? When you imagine it's 2 o'clock Eastern time, you've got, if people work a traditional work schedule, they'll be headed out soon. What might be impacted that you can tell us about?
Well, we're doing structural inspections of all of our facilities. We operate the tunnels and bridges between the states of New York and New Jersey, and also the PATH interstate rapid transit system. And we're inspecting that infrastructure. But it doesn't seem like there's been, as far as we can tell at this point, any damage or any injuries.
All right, Bill Cahill with the Port Authority in New York. Thank you. Now let me go